Good morning, everyone, and good morning to all the media. Good afternoon to the many South Africans. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our media briefing and press briefing. Alongside me, we do have our honorable leader, Musi Maimane, our deputy leader, Nobuntu Hlatso Webster, as well as Ayanda Ali, who is our representative and member of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. I'm immediately going to hand over to our leader, Musi Maimane, to kickstart this afternoon's proceedings.
Good day, and thank you very much to all fellow South Africans. Before I proceed, I'm going to allow our member of the Gauteng legislature, who has fought this battle extraordinarily and effectively, has been key in being able to identify what is a crucial issue in our society. I'm going to ask Ayanda to go, and then we'll work our way down in that way. Do you want to begin, and then we'll go?
Thank you so much. Very good afternoon to yourself. Good afternoon to Nobuntu. Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. I think we as Build One South Africa have come full circle. I think today is a manifestation of what we had set out to do when we promised to champion the issues of real South Africans and those who are concerned about building a better tomorrow today. And today brings us to a point where we can actually say that we have done what we promised to do. We set out to make sure that we do your bidding. We promised during elections that you can trust us and that we will make sure that we are your voice, and that wherever you place us, be it in Parliament or at the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, we will do all that we can to make sure that our presence there is your presence there in the corridors of power. So that is, after all, what we believe democracy to be. It is for the people and by the people. But unfortunately, what we see these days is a top-down approach to governance, where those who are the political elite will sort of tell you what's in your best interest and make decisions on your behalf without you. We have seen that as a Build One South Africa, we successfully engaged you, and you were able to bring a bottom-up approach where you tell us what your issues are and we raise them for you. So just by way of introduction of how we got to this point, we had gone on social media of all places to make a call to ordinary South Africans to say, now that you have placed us at the legislature, now that you have placed us in Parliament, what would you have us do? And we got a number of people responding to say, here's an issue I'd like you to drive for us. Here's something that concerns me. May you please raise this in Parliament, raise that at the legislature. And one gentleman, Patupolo, was one of such respondents who came to us and said, if you're really serious about governing with South Africans to build a better South Africa, please look into the issue of pay disparities. Please look into the fact that when I was employed, I was earning far less than one of my colleagues for the same job that we were doing. And dare I say, I was outperforming this particular colleague, but I was being discriminated against. If you are serious as Build One South Africa about championing our causes, look into this. Well, we didn't delay. We called him right away to come and join us at the legislature to tell us a little bit more about his experience and to see how we could be of assistance and try to see how we could legislate for a solution with that regard. And indeed, what began, I want to say last year, with a series of meetings, began slowly and somewhat informally, then culminated in what we see today. We now have with us a champion who's going to lead this effort for us in Parliament and see whether or not we can amend legislation to make sure that people like Patupolo are never sidelined again, that they're never discriminated against again. And I think this is what excites me about being in a vehicle that really can be sent. Many people will say, Tumamina, but bangathumeki. But we have seen that indeed, siyathumeka, and indeed we can be entrusted with not only your vote, but also your partnership, and we don't take it lightly. So without wasting much time, I actually want to thank those active citizens who had begun working on this process long before they approached Build One South Africa. I mentioned Patupolo Makavana. He was working alongside Atlegang Kavuza, as well as Adhira Bodasing and Advocate Nadine Fourie. You are the kind of partner that Build One South Africa is looking for. An active citizen who doesn't pass the buck, but who stands up and says, I want to be part of building, and I want to make sure that my voice is heard, and that I make sure that life is better for the next person. You have a partner in us as Build One South Africa. So I'm quite excited about that, Musi, as you begin to pave the way forward of what this all means now that we have this partnership with ordinary citizens, and we have proven that we can be trusted with that partnership. Where do we go to from here? What are we solving for? And what does the future have in store?
Thank you very much, Ayanda, and thank you to fellow South Africans. Today we launch the Fair Pay Bill, which seeks to promote equal opportunity and end discrimination. We're living in a country where if you are 25 and between 25 and 35, invariably your chances of getting a job are 1 in 2. If you are between the ages of 18 to 35, your chances of getting a job become even less. The harsh reality of our country is that we have a sea of unemployment and very limited work opportunities. It's made harder by the fact that the majority of the people job seeking, many of them are unemployable in certain instances in that they don't have a matric, but there's a significant proportion of the same group who often are graduates, who are often are first-time job seekers, who many of them are lingering in our townships seeking work opportunities. These are conditions that lead themselves towards a high degree of exploitation. Because as people become desperately seeking work, they find themselves in spaces that they are not the principal negotiators when it comes to a job interview, or being able to say to themselves what represents a fair pay. And therefore, on the 16th of June, as Build One South Africa, we want to put a spotlight on a significant but little discussed injustice facing our youth and previously disadvantaged communities, which is that of unequal and unfair pay. Every year, thousands of graduates and job seekers enter the labor market that often operates in an unfair manner against them. Despite often being qualified, capable, and willing to work, young people in particular become trapped in cycles of underpayment with little power to negotiate fair wages or challenge opaque hiring practices. The odds are often stacked in favor of the employer, those who hold power, to be able to determine what the salary of the young person or the applicant was, often based on a candidate's previous pay or lower pay than the individual is entitled to. This imbalance perpetuates historical inequalities. Young people who are the first in their families to work white-collar jobs, black professionals, and women often start their careers earning less. This is invariably never a competence issue, but rather it is due to a system that allows employers to exploit previous underpayment and first-time job applicants. When your salary history is used against you, past disadvantage becomes future injustice. This is both an economic issue, but as crucial, is equally a moral issue. It is an issue of justice, as the arc of history points towards. It goes towards the very heart of our constitution that seeks to address historical injustices and speaks of the values that are enshrined in our constitution in section 9 and 10 of our constitution's Bill of Rights, those being dignity and equality. And therefore today as Build One South Africa, when you go into politics, you have to answer a basic question: on whose behalf do you fight and against who? And for us, that basic question is we fight for South Africans who are left out or unfairly treated against those who abuse power. Whether those who abuse power are elected officials or are businesses that find themselves in powerful positions, we have to stand on behalf of South Africans to be able to make that journey. And so this bill today seeks to address that injustice And Ubuntu will be able to take you through the very elements of all that bill, and beginning with young people who have lived through some of this experience, and they can tell you better themselves what it feels like to enter the job market. I remember my first interview fondly as I went bright-eyed seeking for a job, but not knowing what sits on the other side. And so if someone said to me, look, Musi, it doesn't matter what qualifications you have, this is how much you will earn, I had none the wiser the power to be able to stand up and go, actually, this is what I think the job is worth, let alone what I'm worth, because my worth cannot be determined by my salary. But if the job is worth X, I should be remunerated X, regardless of where my historical pay space was, or effectively what the employer seeks to determine my value to be. And I think this is a journey towards codifying that in law, that abuse never occurs, given the fact that our history is a history fought with such profound injustice. Let me hand over to you.
Sure. So we've invited one or two young South Africans to join us this morning. Keegan, you can come to the front. That's just going to share a bit on his lived experience.
Thank you. Hello all, Keegan Alexander, a young professional in the software industry here in Cape Town. I'm here today to support BOSA in passing this bill. As a young professional and other young professionals, we've all been through the interview process and the application process, whereby we get asked, can you provide us with your payslip, irrespective of our qualifications, of our skill sets, our work ethic, how hard we work. You get the sense that, okay, they're going to base me based off what I'm earning with my previous company. And even myself, personally, I've experienced this when trying to shift careers into a different direction, and still getting asked, can you provide us with your payslip? Which doesn't make sense. I'm going into totally pivoting to a different career. So that's why I'm here today to support BOSA in supporting this, and thanking you guys for fighting for us as young professionals as well, and other professionals, as it's something that I feel is very unfair and that needs to be spoken about. Thank you.
Thanks, Keegan.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Apim Mhlakaza. I am currently a student, and the fair pay bill appeals to me as a student because I am actually looking forward into getting to the employment and labor space after finishing my degree. And as a South African, when I get employment, remuneration is such a huge thing for me, because I know that as a person who comes from a disadvantaged background, there are quite a number of responsibilities that I will have to take over as a young person in that household. So fair remuneration is a appeals to me because I know that we live in a country which is the most unequal country in the world, actually, and this thing of exploitation of labor and people who are actually deserving to earn more appeals to me, because I know that the system is actually making the inequality worse, and young South Africans who are trying to thrive, it is actually a constraint to them, and it makes them regressive in more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Keegan and Apiwe. Deputy Leader, over to you.
Sure, thank you. And thank you very much to Keegan and Apia for being here and for also sharing your stories. I think one of the major things that comes out of what they're saying, and something that we just know about South Africa and young people in the workplace, is that there's a system that often says that if you start off on the back foot, that's where you're going to end. And that's how you're going to continue to try and, carve out a path for yourself. And we're here this morning to say it can't be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And one of the things that Apiwe talks about, which I think is so important, is the issue of systems. Because how you change a country, how you change a nation, how you change a society is through systems. And that's why we're here today. We're here to say, let's address the issue in a system that has preserved disadvantaged instead of actually correcting it. And so that's why today we're unveiling the Fair Pay Bill. This is a legislative proposal, and with it we seek to amend the Employment Equity Act. Ultimately, what we want to see is fairness, we want to see transparency, We want to see dignity. And when we talk about equity, we actually want to see equity. And more than anything, we actually want to see a just system, a just workplace system, a just economy, and a just, ultimately, a society for young people and for everybody, all professionals, all workers, to be able to exist in South Africa. So in terms of the bill itself and what it seeks to do, it really seeks to outlaw the mechanisms that have entrenched wage and salary disparities. And our leader, Musi Maimane, spoke to that quite extensively. The key aspects, primarily, there's 4 key aspects, and I'm going to speak very briefly to them. The first is to end salary history discrimination. So ultimately, what that means, employers will no longer be allowed to ask for or rely on your past payslip when you are applying for a job, or when your salary is being determined. It's actually ultimately one of the drivers of salary or wage inequality in the system. And this means that what it does is you are going to be paid according to not only your value, and I know someone mentioned value before, which is absolutely key, but also according to what the job is, what the job entails, what work you are actually going to be doing. The second is that it has to say that the employer must declare salary range. And what it would ultimately mean, should this bill be passed, is that every job advertisement will be legally required to disclose a salary range. We often see jobs that are advertised, there's guessing games. You come in, and sometimes, because of the system, sometimes because of desperation, particularly young people, when they're asked, okay, so how much do you want to earn, will say probably less than, one, what they're worth, but also what the job is, in order to get a foot in the door, particularly in the unemployment reality that we have in South Africa. And so ultimately what this bill would do is make it compulsory for employers to be able to set the salary range when they're advertising. Thirdly, equal pay for equal work. The bill exists to actually strengthen provisions which are in our constitutions, and various other policies and legislation, that ultimately we must be treated fairly, that your skills, your qualifications, and experience are the right determining factors versus your race or your gender or your age when it comes to the workplace. And then lastly, you will have a new right. And I know this is something which will be exciting for many people who have probably been doing this, but know that they are actually risking litigation when they're doing it. You will have the right to be able to discuss your salary, to discuss a potential salary with people who are already employees or working in that space. And ultimately what that's about is it gives you the opportunity to be able to assess whether you're being treated fairly, whether you're being treated equitably, whether you're being treated equally with other employees. And so from here, where do we go? There's a legislative process that kicks off as of today. We will be tabling the Fair Pay Bill with the Speaker of Parliament, and this initiates a multi-step legislative process that ensures the bill receives proper scrutiny and public input. And so there will be a technical process that will unfold from there on. And then the second part of it is that the bill will be gazetted for public comment. And this is where we really want to get various stakeholders, and we encourage various stakeholders, including business, because this is ultimately something that exists within the space of business, to be able to give their comment, their review on this bill. We want young people, we want all professionals, we want all workers to be able to engage on this. But we also want organizations, institutions, labor unions, and like I say, associations that represent business to be able to engage on this. And then thirdly, this is going to be engaged on by the Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labor. And this is something we will appear to this portfolio committee on as members of parliament to actually represent and defend the bill. And here there'll be in-depth debates, there'll be scrutiny of the bill, and then finally it will be the formal tabling of the bill in National Assembly. And what will happen there'll be deliberation, there may be amendment, and then eventual voting on the bill. And in this process, we're going to make sure that we're engaging with fellow MPs. We're going to make sure that we're engaging with that portfolio committee to make sure that we're able to pass this through. And so we want to keep you engaged in this whole process. I think Ayanda was quite comprehensive in explaining how this bill came about. It's who we are as Build One South Africa. We've always said that Build One South Africa is truly about South Africans. And this is our first bill that we are introducing in Parliament as Build One South Africa. And we are introducing a bill that came from South Africans. South Africans said, we want you to take this to Parliament and we want you to engage this issue in Parliament. And so we are still going to be engaging South Africans further with a nationwide petition, with roundtables with the affected people. We'll be in university campuses. We'll be engaged, like I said, with various associations and various other stakeholders. We are going to have town hall meetings where we're going to engage on this, and we will be engaging media and even on our own platforms and podcasts and various other videos explaining the process and keeping you up to date on the process. Ultimately, I want to say that this is a bill that is about dignity, that is about true employment equity, but I think most importantly, it's a bill that's about saying, how do we make the system more just? It's about saying, how do we make it such that where you have started off doesn't determine where you ultimately go in terms of your career and in terms of your mobility. It's a bill that's about saying your race, your gender, your age shouldn't be a hindrance to how far you can get in your career and in participating in South Africa's economy. And so we look forward to championing this, and we look forward to having your support and engagement on it.
Thank you so much to our deputy leader. Are there any further comments or input from Leader Ayanda? Sure. Thank you so much for joining us. And like the deputy leader said, this campaign is for you. And we're encouraging South Africans, especially young South Africans, to take ownership and to join us on our platforms, make contact with us, be on the lookout of when we are meeting with various stakeholders, as this fair pay bill is not just about wages. It's actually not about that. It's about the dignity for you. So thank you so much for joining us.
I think, Roger, just the only comment I'd make is,
Sure.
keep in mind that we're not determining the salary. We're merely saying that what you deem the job to be worth, pay the next applicant that. Don't discriminate. Don't say, well, this is your first time you are working here, therefore your salary must be less. Don't say, because we're living in a country today where many people have to loosely pay what is classically called black tax. But it is not unique only to black South Africans. It applies to any person who works and has to support parents, has to support siblings, as is becoming a reality for many South Africans. Therefore, what you cannot do is in an isolated case, take that individual and say, because you are here and this is your first job or your previous work was X, I might start off I might be an accountant working in a small firm. And then I get poached by a big firm. But that big firm loses the right to say your salary will be benchmarked to your previous small firm. It must be saying, in a big firm, this is what we pay the accountant. And therefore, when I come in, that's what I work with. Because that's why people can have upward mobility. The economic vision of BOSA, if I was to sum it up, is to make sure more and more people move into the middle class. Because when people move into the middle class, they can pay tax, they can ultimately be net, if you like, everyone is able to then make a significant contribution to society. That's a stable society. South Africa is unstable because it does not really have a middle class. People are either super wealthy or super poor. And this bill aims to correct that historical injustice and bring alignment, given the fact that there could be other discriminatory factors. I can't pay a woman less, or I can't pay a young person less, or whatever. I must be able to say, if the job is doing X and it's worth Y, pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, leader. Thank you so much. Sure.
Question, I think I mentioned before, and I'm not asking these questions without the knowledge of our struggles that we have, and the injustices in the workplace. I mean, many of us experience it. But Lucy, I do want to ask you about like when you look at experience, especially with young graduates. It would be unfair if a journalism student comes from, I don't know, UCT and comes to work in my workplace and gets paid more than me, or wants to be paid the same money that I pay and do the same work that I do in this instance. And I'm just using this as an example because this is a specialized role, and it's not something you can just come and do as compared to other news. Does that not become unfair? Because I mean, an accountant with 30 years of experience can surely not be compared to an accounting student. The same goes for cybersecurity officials, or cybersecurity personnel. You can't really compare that from what you learn in a university and apply that in a workplace, because the workplace is the real world and the university is, I almost want to say, a mimic of the real world. So where does that, has that been considered?
Sure.
Because I mean, experience always trumps qualifications and skills, because at some point the experienced, let's say experienced worker, it would be highly unfair if a student from university comes in and that person comes with the attitude that I need to be paid a certain amount because this is the grade that I must be put on, and this is what I need to get paid, in comparison to an official that's been working for 30 years and you want to. I mean, where does that unfairness is a bit unclear for me. That's the one question I have.
Okay.
And then the second question is the impact on companies. Like companies are really struggling to pay salaries of its general workforce and its workforce that it currently has. I mean, in an economy that's will probably grow by less than 1%, and with investments on its all-time low, how do was that considered in this legislation that you are proposing? And the last question I want to ask is that do you want to take that power away from companies and employers, that bargaining chip that they have to determine salaries? Is that one of your goals, to take that bargaining chip away from them, or that power away from them, to say that, listen, here's an engineer needs to be paid 20,000 rand a month, and you cannot pay an engineer 10,000 rand a month based on his age or her age, or based on anything else?
Those are great questions, Jason. And I think actually we're doing the exact opposite. We are strengthening transparency and making sure that there is equality in negotiations. So let me start with the first question, which your second question last, and then I'll work my way through. No one can determine salary, right? It's legislatively, you can't do that. Only the employer can do that. But then the employer must be transparent as a principle to say, if I'm looking for a person with 10 years experience, let me come back to you. You might have 20 years experience. Then I must be specific. Candidate who's applying and has 20 years experience is going to be remunerated X. That's the application. Now we are asking for that transparency to be put forward. You yourself have determined what X is, and you yourself will determine who the applicants are, because as applicants are sitting at home, a first year student then can't wake up in the morning and say, actually, I want to apply for the same job and get it. There is a process in employment about saying, at inquiry phase and post at negotiating phase. So when somebody applies for your job, as you've used an example, they must come into the room knowing, actually, I have so much experience, therefore I can apply in that bin because that's what the application stated. What we are trying to eliminate is where we say, wait, I need to replace somebody with 20 years experience. Then people with experience are applying, right? You are being paid and I don't know, let me, for arbitrary numbers, you are paid 10,000 Rand a month for arbitrary numbers. Then the same people who apply, maybe some of them might be coming from another publication, but they've got the same experience. The employer does not declare that actually we pay people with this much experience X. Then they say, give us your pay slip. And then you produce your pay slip and you are earning 5,000 because of the history of where you come from. Then the employer says, great, we'll match you at 5,500. So what you've now done is that actually you have used the basis of their historical employment to peg their salary rather than like for like, same job. When somebody is applying, then how do we match the salaries? Do you follow what I mean? So what we are trying to eliminate is that at that inquiry phase, that a person cannot use your historical payslip to be able to determine what could potentially be less. Because also, you must keep in mind, let's say you were to leave today, this environment. Now you go work for BBC. They pay in pounds, I suspect. And you have the same experience as a journalist from the BBC. When you arrive at the BBC, they say, give us your South African payslip. It arrives in rands. After the GNU is finished with it, it is a little bit interesting. And then they say, no, we'll pay you. Oh, actually, this is only a few pounds. That's what we'll pay you. That would be unfair, surely. Because you would have the same experience, but they are now pegging your salary on the back of historical conditions rather than the prospect of where you are going for. And then to your earlier question, of course, experience is crucial and experience is costed for. But when you put forward an application, be crystal clear what you want. We are actually now wanting to make sure employers are deliberative in putting an advert so that you also don't create an asymmetry where you can say, no, actually, because in a world where people are desperate, you could find someone with 20 years experience coming to apply for an internship job, but that is not declared up front, and then they just get that, and then suddenly your salary has to go back to that of an intern. Whereas what you are actually wanting to say to companies is that be specific when you make your job adverts, advertise what you are going to pay, but be clear what the candidate is and what experience you are looking for so that you don't end up in a situation of that asymmetry. Of course, I myself, having worked in business, understand fully the fact that when people are experienced, you are going to employ them at a level that's different to a new job entrant. But you would have to be, what the bill seeks to do is to be specific, and you must be determining of it up front. You can't just simply say, we'll just run random interviews, and at the end of the day, use whatever the salary pay slips of those people are for them to determine. And then also, I think as clauses of the bill, allowing you the opportunity to be able to say, I'm coming into an environment such as this one, therefore, I need to be able to speak to other employees here to figure out where I sit in that, is an important dynamic. Because I think all of us can tell a story. I mean, I can tell you of CAs who says, I arrived at work, I was the CA, and then I noticed that the PA who was allocated to me earns as much as me. Now, I've got higher qualification, less experience. She's got lower qualifications, more work experience, but her salaries are exactly the same. That also has to be corrected for, whereas you would never hire a senior CA as a partner in the same bandwidth as you would a PA. And I'm not lost. The reality of economic growth is not lost on me. But at the same time as that, it cannot be the appropriate conditions for any sense of exploitation. I'm merely asking for transparency, equity, and dignity. That's all this bill is about. Be transparent. Tell the people, we are looking for a PhD graduate to pay them 100 rands a month. Then PhD graduates can apply for that if that's what they want.
Sure. Lobunto?
Yeah, I would just add, Jason, at the heart of this matter is actually inequality and discrepancies that actually exist broadly. Now, when you look at, for example, the 2023 PwC Executive Director's Report and other studies, it shows you that South African women earn between 23 to 35% less than their male counterparts. And so those are some of the discrepancies that this bill seeks to look at. The fact that it is a reality that sits as a statistical fact, that you come in as a woman and for the same job, you're likely to earn 23 to 35% less than a male counterpart. So that's one of the realities. You also have discrepancies on the basis of race in South Africa, and Stats SA actually reports on these as well, where you find that based on race, you can in the same job earn up to half of what a counterpart actually earns. And then lastly, what then happens is that those who are affected the most are generally first generation professionals, that come in and they start in a role that pays less, regardless of what the qualification is, what the experience is, and then you keep that going throughout a whole career because you have to keep producing this payslip that justifies you getting paid less. But I think the point that I really wanted to make more is that statistically, there's a reality that sits about that inequality. And we're talking about instances where there's equality in the job that's being performed more than anything. There's equality in you showing up and in the outcome and in the job that's being performed, and you're actually ultimately getting paid less because there's a historical cycle. There's a cyclical factor that has determined how much you can actually get paid.
Sure. Thanks, Deputy Leader. Thanks so much, Jason. And everyone else, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much. Let's go and fight for it. Fair pay.
But Jason, if you want me to march with you to News 24,
No.
I will come with you.